we are now going to talk about adolescence, and we're going to start with physical development. So first off, what is adolescence? The definition. This can be really hard to define. Technically, it's a transition period between childhood and adulthood. It's a coming of age. But what does that mean exactly? When does adolescence end and adulthood begin? This can be a very tricky question, and depending on who you ask, there could be a lot of different answers to it. So first we're going to look at it historically. So historically, children entered the workforce very early. There's a lot of child labor. Adolescence began to emerge as a separate developmental stage when changes in society demanded that children stay in school longer and delay entry into the workforce. So when they started to say children need to be in school, not working, then we started to see adolescence emerge as its own stage. In our society, in the US, the move into adulthood happens in stages. We're going to talk about some historical figures. First is G. Stanley Hall. In 1904, he proposed the idea of adolescence as an important and separate developmental stage. So it's something that we need to consider before or between childhood and adulthood. He believed it was a period of what he called storm and stress, marked by intense turmoil. He said that adolescents swing back and forth between extremes: sadness and happiness, overconfidence and self-doubt, dependence and independence. He thought that rebelling against parents and parents' values are necessary in making the transition to adulthood. A lot of people still feel that this is the point of adolescence and that rebellion is normal. So his views are still hanging around today. Anna Freud was Sigmund Freud's daughter. Freud had the theory of psychosexual development, which we didn't cover in this class. His stage for adolescence was called the genital stage. He believed that sexual feelings are initially aimed at parents of the opposite sex, if you've ever heard of the Oedipus complex or the Electra complex. And then those feelings transfer to other adults or adolescents of the opposite sex. Okay, so that was what Freud thought. His daughter, Anna Freud, said that adolescents have to keep surging sexual urges in check, and this leads them to unpredictable behavior, leads them to define their parents, confusion, mood swings. So according to her, it was all about suppressing sexual urges that cause the storm and stress of adolescence. Modern theorists have a slightly different view. They no longer see the storm and stress as inevitable. Instead, adolescence is a period of reorganization of biological, social, cognitive, and emotional functions. It's just when the brain reorganizes itself and the body reorganizes itself. The question of when it starts is pretty easy. This is not a hard thing to define. So what starts adolescence? Puberty, everyone's favorite topic. So the definition of puberty is the biological stage of development characterized by changes that lead to reproductive capacity. All it means is that it's the changes in the body that allow you to reproduce. That is puberty. It's accompanied by changing emotions, perceptions, and intellect. It's not just about physical changes. Hormones and changing chemistry in the brain, as well as the changing physicality, alter emotions, perceptions, and intellect. Pre-puberty. So these are changes that kind of start to happen in the brain and the body, but before the body enters reproductive capacity. So pre-puberty starts at around age 8 for girls and about age 10 for boys. Puberty is in full swing by age 12 and not fully done until your mid-20s. Remember, we've talked about how the prefrontal cortex doesn't finish until you're 25 years old. That's technically when puberty ends, because that's when all of the changes stop. And girls tend to be about 2 years ahead of boys. So hormones. Hormones are the driving force of puberty. Before puberty, boys and girls have basically the same amount of hormones in their bloodstreams. And there are two hormones that really drive these changes. The first is testosterone. In utero, girl development is the default. All fetuses start as girls. It's just the way it works. It is only the presence of testosterone that creates the sex-based differences in the brain and the body. So it's the presence of testosterone that takes that female embryo and turns it male. And testosterone stays about the same in girls and boys until puberty. And then during puberty, testosterone reaches 20 times the level in boys as in girls. 20 times. And that's what drives the changes in boys. For girls, it's estrogen. Production increases during puberty, and this leads to the development of breasts, wider hips, etc., the changes in the body. It also starts the menstrual cycle. So it's testosterone and estrogen that cause the changes of puberty. So first we're going to talk about puberty in girls. Like I said, it starts around age 12. Girls hit puberty first, and they're about 2 years ahead of boys. And they reach their peak growth spurt at about 12. So boys reach their peak growth at about 14. But on average, girls grow a little over 13 inches. So it peaks at about 12, and they're usually done growing around 16 years old. There are variations. On average, puberty starts around 12, but there are differences based on ethnicity, urban versus rural location. They've even found a difference in when a girl starts puberty based on whether or not her father is present in the home. So there are a lot of factors, emotional, physical, nutritional, all these factors that can influence when a girl starts puberty. So menstruation is a big part of it. And when we have menstruation, most girls tend to go through mood swings as they go through their cycle, just because of the changing hormones as that cycle goes through. And we also see a change of energy. So in the first week and a half of a cycle, so before ovulation, so the cycle technically starts the first day of the period. That's the first week of menstruation. So in the first week and a half before the ovulation happens, girls tend to have an elevated mood, high energy level. They're intellectually sharper. They're more prone to bonding with friends and flirting with boys. But after ovulation, which occurs at about 2 weeks into the cycle, there's a sharp drop in estrogen and a rise in progesterone, which leads to a decrease in all of those things. And then in week 4, they get cramps, headaches, irritability, desire to be left alone, and this is a peak period for conflicts, especially with parents. So the cycle of a girl's menstruation really does influence her mood, her energy, and even how well she can pay attention and learn in school, and how she gets along with her parents. The age of puberty is getting younger. We see girls starting it earlier and earlier. So why is that? In the 1900s, girls didn't start menstruation until about 15, but that age keeps getting younger. We said now it's 12. So why? Well, a big reason is better nutrition and medical care. So when girls have better nutrition, they tend to start earlier. Girls with poor nutrition start later. It's just something that happens. There's also a theory that a lot of the hormones that we use in our food and in birth control are entering the water sources. And as girls drink that water and are exposed to the hormones, it might trigger them to start earlier too. So some of the psychological impacts of starting puberty and starting menstruation. So the psychological impact of menarche, which is the first period, it varies by culture and historical period. In different historical periods and in different cultures, it has different meanings. So in some cultures, it's celebrated. When a girl starts her period, it's her becoming a woman. They might even throw parties and have celebrations. But in other cultures, it's seen as something dirty to be hidden away. There are some cultures where women still have to go isolate themselves while they are on their menstrual cycle, so they don't contaminate the men. Taboos in some cultures, like ours, mean that some girls hit puberty without knowing about menarche. They haven't been taught about it because adults don't like to talk about it. So can you imagine the fears that girls have when they start bleeding and they don't know why? Maybe the shame that they experience. There are cultures where they do not teach girls about this natural cycle, so when it starts with them, they have no idea what's going on. In Hong Kong, they did a study in 2003, and they said that girls who felt positively about menarche, they felt more grown up, more feminine when it happened. They were more likely to be educationally prepared to welcome it as a natural event. They were more likely to have a positive body image and reject traditional negative attitudes. So this just means that if we educate girls about their periods as a natural cycle, as a natural event, then they're more likely to view it positively and have a better image about themselves. So next is puberty in boys. The effects of testosterone. It's testosterone that triggers their puberty, so what does it do? It leads to growth spurts, increased physical strength, and more sexual awareness. Testosterone adds bulk. It increases the capacity of the bone to store calcium, phosphorus, and other elements that are good for bones and muscles. This makes their bones and muscles stronger. Testosterone, unfortunately, also triggers the development of acne. Most boys actually have worse acne than girls, but due to cultural beauty standards, girls may suffer more, even though the physical acne is less severe than the boys. So even though boys have more, girls suffer more because of it. But in boys, we see growth spurts, physical strength, and sexual awareness come sooner and to a greater degree than they come in girls. And boys tend to show off for the benefit of girls. They're trying to impress the girls, and this can lead them to take dangerous risks or do physical violence against each other. They start to crave independence and they want respect from their male peers. So junior high boys are kind of the worst from my experience. You can work with a junior high boy one-on-one and he's fine. He can pay attention, he can sit still, he's nice and polite. But you put more than one junior high boy together and suddenly they start showing off for each other, start misbehaving. It's like they want to impress each other, and all of their ability to sit still and learn and pay attention goes out the window because they're so focused on trying to show off for each other. And contrary to a lot of stereotypes, boys can be just as moody and obsessed with appearance as girls can be. So some behavior differences. This is how boys are different than girls. Language. Boys tend to talk less than girls, even less than before puberty. So we see a difference before puberty in how much they talk, but we see an even greater difference after puberty. Most boys tend to prefer nonverbal activities like video games or driving, things they can do without having to talk. Boys are more prone to engage in physical activity. It helps them work off excess testosterone. If they are engaged in a heavy physical activity, it can help them work that off. We see a higher aggression. Adolescent boys tend to act out emotions physically rather than verbally. The aggression pathway in a male brain is tied to direct physical action, whereas in a female brain, it appears to be more closely linked with cognitive and verbal functions. So when a girl feels aggression, she processes them cognitively and verbally, but when a boy feels aggression, he processes it physically. And then sex. So thoughts and emotions of a boy in puberty are riveted to the subject of sex. They can't stop thinking about it. They will ogle girls' bodies in person, print, or screen. Testosterone does not fluctuate the way estrogen does in women, meaning that men don't have a cycle of highs and lows, and this means that they are primed for sex all the time. They are thinking about it all the time. Okay? We will continue this in the next video.